Hello everybody. So usually not much to say on a Sunday .day video, but there is a lot of news this weekend to discuss. So let's go over it very quick. So Michael Saylor, of course, this morning tweeting best continue, right, with the B of Bitcoin. Of course, he bought more Bitcoin as usual on Sunday. The question is, how much Bitcoin did he buy? Well, I'm expecting a bigger buy than we've had in weeks. I'm expecting more than 500 Bitcoin, hopefully 1,000. Hopefully we see a clear path to doing 1,000 Bitcoin a week if I have a preferred ATMs. That's what I would be looking at, a clear path towards 1,000 a week. And if we get that clear path, we'll see based on how much ATM he did on stretch, because he had dozens of opportunity to ATM stretch throughout the later part of the week last week, right? He had many opportunities, Wednesdays, Thursday, Friday, stretch, trading at 100, 101, and then EATMs and brings it back down. Don't pay attention to the after-hour action. That's not very meaningful. So we had that, and I expect this to continue into next week because SOFR went down. You may have seen trending that the quote-unquote SOFR, like risk-free rate, quote-unquote, went down. So that means that instruments like stretch become more valuable as the market-wide rates actually drop. So I expect him to have bought more than 500 Bitcoin, and I hope to see a clear path where he can actually get us to 1,000 Bitcoins a week. And so if he did that, give or take, that would be 50,000 Bitcoin a year based on just ATMing on the preferred without touching the common. That would be a big deal. And now I want to talk about what's happening with crypto. So Bitcoin is up for a Sunday morning. That's fairly uncommon. It's up. Why is it up? Well, we really don't know, but it could be because of the Stimmy Checks. Are the Stimmy Checks about to make a comeback just like they did in 2020? As always, unfortunately, I have a feeling that many of us will not be receiving these checks. These checks may be targeted more at Gen Z or people starting out in life. But that's okay, because we could benefit. If these checks actually get their hands to Gen Z, what are Gen Z going to buy? They're more likely to buy digital assets. That money is more likely to flow into digital assets. Again, if you ever take a Uber, have a conversation with an Uber driver, guy in their early 20s, ask them what they invested in. It's crypto. It flows in crypto. Oftentimes not the type of crypto we like, not Bitcoin, but they want to buy some fancy coin, meme coin, whatever. Or anyways, that money could trigger a lot of liquidity that flows to crypto. And if liquidity flows to crypto as a whole, which one is the biggest crypto? It is Bitcoin, and so that should benefit Bitcoin, and that's why Kobesi letter here is saying that if we actually have Stimmy Checks, we could see some action in high growth stocks and in crypto. So even if you don't qualify for those checks, and we don't know what the limit is going to be, it could still be good for the portfolio. Another reason why this could be up, and we need to talk about this. This is getting annoying. It is the shutdown. So the Senate, and thank goodness, the Senate is open this weekend. They are working on the weekend. And I say thank you, because it's been 40 days now. We are waiting for the government to reopen. Apparently they could hold a vote tonight. But unfortunately, if you look at the betting markets, which have been pretty accurate, unfortunately, the betting market are still pretty negative. The betting market telling that they expect November 19th now. That would be just before Thanksgiving, because we know it would take a few days. I mean, the head of the FAA already said that even if the shutdown ends today, it will still take a few days to normalize. So if Americans want to be able to travel for Thanksgiving, you probably need to stop the government shutdown like 5 days before Thanksgiving. And I tend to align with that. I think that's when the shutdown's going to end, before Thanksgiving, because that's where most people fly, and people would be very, very upset if they couldn't fly for Thanksgiving, especially as the head of the FAA is now saying that by sometime next week we could go as high as 20% of all flights canceled in the US. Think about it, 20% of all flights canceled in the US. That would be a cost that is hard to bear for most places in America. So that's why I think kind of the FAA is forcing the shutdown to end. We'll see, but that's going to be a catalyst over the next 10 days. That's going to be a big catalyst. And then don't forget, of course, about yesterday's catalyst for strategy. More importantly, which is James Chanos is done with the trade. Is he gonna long strategy now? If he's done shorting, maybe he's gonna long strategy. I don't really know, but it's he's done with the trade, and the people he advises and the people he encouraged to do that trade are likely going to follow him. Like sheep. That's what sheep do. They're likely to follow him and be like, hey, okay, well, he stopped the trade, so I'm stopping the trade. So that's a catalyst that I think we could feel on Monday. And I wanted to briefly finish on another piece of news, and this is more of a general statement, but it's about the 50-year mortgage. So Trump tweeted this, 50-year mortgage. This is just showing you further and further that fiat is kind of a joke. It's kind of a joke. Whenever you go get a mortgage, that money's not sitting on a checking account, right? It's money created out of thin air. The commercial banks create the money. With a 50-year mortgage, they are going to create much more liquidity than with a 40 or a 30-year mortgage. And essentially, it really doesn't matter because you already rent your place. There's no such thing as free and clear ownership because you always rent your place from the local government in the form of property taxes, which in some states are very high. I mean, Texas, property tax is very high, right? California, not as high, but in Texas, it's pretty darn high. So you're always renting. So again, 50-year mortgage, I think a lot of people who love real estate are going to be very compelled by 50-year mortgage because, people see fiat as a joke. So if you can get 2% for 50 years, then, why wouldn't you? You would just look at your payment into a more expensive property tax. It doesn't really matter. I want to say one last thing. This is the way of the world. I did a quick search. I knew that Spain had 35 and 40-year mortgages for a long while. But actually, it's not just Spain. It's the UK has 40-year mortgages. Japan has 40-year mortgages. So, maybe in a classic negotiation tactic, Trump is saying 50 years, but he's gonna like settle for a 40-year. Maybe that could be something. But if that were to happen, that could entirely reignite real estate, and real estate is bad right now. All of the statistics in real estate show a big despair, much more than we have had in crypto and MSTR for the past few weeks. So I think that's very bullish for liquidity if that actually happens. But either way, you're renting your place from the government always. So that's just the way it works. Anyways, this was not financial advice. This is not investment advice. This is just entertainment. I hope you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe. Follow me on Patreon. Follow me on X. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful, wonderful day.